Hey, everybody, welcome in. Happy Monday. We're kicking off the week on a positive note here at Gorilla Sports. This is Gorilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Jesse Montano. You're going to be joined by Meghan Angley in just a second. And she doesn't hate us, Meghan. Chloe Thiel back in the producer's room. We got a great show for you guys today. We're continuing our previews of the divisions around the NHL, moving west, hitting the Pacific Division today. Do want to remind you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Head on over, trustedamerican.com. They want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. If you act right now, might even help you stick some couple dollars back in your pocket here as summer begins to wind down. Head on over, trustedamerican.com. See how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey, everybody, welcome in. How's it going? Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley back for another week here back in the podcast studio. And what's today? August 11th. I think we're under a month from at least being back at the rink because we're just about 1 month exactly. September 12th is the first day of the rookie tournament, which typically comes at the end of that first week of rookie camp, which is preceding training camp. So we're close, Meghan. We're inside 30 days here. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I'm getting stir crazy though, but I'm trying to soak up not having a lot to do. So like my weekends are very lazy at the moment, but I feel unproductive. I'm missing hockey. And we're getting into the slog of the offseason in terms of our topics. Not that there's anything wrong with previewing the divisions, you guys. We need this to come.
We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here for sure on show topics. Like you said, not a shot at the Pacific Division, but
yeah, I'm excited to talk about them. It's just I can't wait for the content we're planning to bring you for that time to finally be here.
We were talking yesterday. We've got a show coming up that's centered around the 30th anniversary logo. That's the core of it. That's not what the show is about.
Be way more fun.
It's gonna be way more fun than that. But just to the point of like, it's the slog of the offseason, no doubt about it. Damn, you just said something there that spurred a thought for me. And now I can't remember. Did you know yesterday was National Lazy Day? Sunday, yeah.
Wow, I celebrated it.
My wife and I tried our hardest to embrace that. We had a couple errands we had to get done and stuff like that first part of the day. We didn't know I would have planned ahead better if I knew that it was National Lazy Day. But we did our best to just hang out. We have a new seating area like on the front of our house. We face this like walking trail and an open space and everything. So we were trying our best to just sit out there and enjoy the peace.
I really like that. I didn't take it to heart too much on Sunday, but Saturday was very lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't do those days every week, but I definitely need a hard reset day.
1,000%. Do you get Sunday scaries?
You know, that's one thing that this job is really every day is the Sunday. You know what I mean? Like we don't in season, at least maybe now this time of year, we do work on slightly more traditional work schedules with always the caveat of something could happen kind of at any moment that you have to react to. But I tell this story a lot, and I apologize because I've probably told it to you on multiple occasions, Meghan. One of the first people that I really got to know in this industry was Lauren Gardner, LG Red.
Yes.
And I mean, she's just the absolute best, pro's pro. And it was in my first year, we were at an abs practice. I mean, it was one of those like second week of February. Just slog part of the schedule. And I think it was like a Saturday or Sunday. We were at Family Sports, and it's just, no one really wanted to be there. And LG and I were talking, and she goes, days like today can definitely be a drag and the season can be long, but she's, Jesse, we work in this industry so that we're not working for the weekends. Because every day, as boring as stuff like this can be, we're lucky to get to show up here, and we get to do really cool stuff, and we get to be places that other people wish they could, and all that stuff. She's like, so I want to do this job because I was tired of working for the weekend, and I don't do that anymore. And that is something I have tried to, because this job can definitely test you a bit as you move later into the year and stuff like that, and as you get towards the end of the season. And I always try to keep that perspective from LG in mind of like, we're not here to work for the weekends. We're not here for the Sunday scaries and all that stuff. We're here because something we care about, we really love. And it can be really fun. So, long-winded way of saying I used to get them bad when I worked in an office. This job has helped with the Sunday scaries specifically.
Yeah, I actually really love my Sundays. I think because of this job, because I didn't always.
And the Avs, not always, not every week.
I was just going to say, it's usually their off day.
It's usually the off day.
So it's my productive day where I can catch up on things that maybe lapse a little bit during the week. And so I always feel really accomplished, and I just am so grateful to have that time. So anyways, big fan of Sundays.
Yeah.
Wasn't always, but I love this job and I love Sundays.
And it's yeah, just like you said, it's usually on most weeks a non-game day and a full off day for the team. So, you get into January and it's kind of like, oh shit, I get a day here to catch my breath for a second. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Sundays are A-okay with
Sundays
me.
are fun days.
Sundays are fun days. Can you tell that it's August? We're just vamping for as long as we possibly can.
I know, I feel bad. I almost want to do a behind the scenes at what the off season entails for reporters. And I think it would surprise people that there is still plenty of work to be done, but it's not all front facing. And so that does sometimes make like the pod topics tough, because we don't want to just rehash pod topics that come about every summer just inevitably. Like, we still want it to be on topic, related to hockey. So anyways, let's get into our Pacific Division preview.
We don't want to be doing Mount Rushmores every summer and all that. We try to keep it. I like that's such an easy go-to sports topic.
I actually saw one the other day and I was like, we should do it, because it actually edited, but probably through AI, the faces onto the Rushmore they're doing. I'm trying to remember who it was. It was like, I don't know, Seattle sports history. It wasn't that. That's the only thing I can think of. And it actually looked kind of cool. And I was like, well, now I kind of want to see like Joe Sakic's face on Mount Rushmore, but I don't know how to ethically do that.
We'll see. And I'm also typically unpopular on that kind of Mount Rushmore stuff, because how I feel about like the new age and the new era of hockey in particular, where I think the players are just so much more talented than they were 60s, 70s, 80s, even the early 90s. The game has just evolved so much that like my Mount Rushmore is probably one legacy player and then 3 players that are currently on this roster.
I mean, if it's my Mount Rushmore, then it's all my special little guys.
Well, exactly.
We've got a collection of DU players on Mount Rushmore.
Troy Terry doesn't even play for the Avs. I know, but who did make the thumbnail today? That was an Easter egg.
But he does play for the Ducks, and you better believe we're going to talk about it.
Play for the Ducks. Anything else to get off your chest before we start?
No. A few comments in the chat about the goalie experience.
Oh, yeah.
You guys had so much fun. I think I downplayed it on Friday because the content wasn't out yet, but I had so much fun.
It was one of those things that, because we were limited on our time. We had to get back for a show, but as we were packing up and Megan was taking the gear off, we were like, yeah, we got to get back out here and get a proper hour of ice to fire some pucks at Megan.
I regretted not dropping down
Yeah.
after the fact. Guys, I'm pretty flexible. I know Jesse constantly talks about doing the splits,
No.
but I'm also very flexible too. And I really want to see if I can do it.
Go full like post to post.
I want to know if I can do it.
And I feel bad because there's this guy, I don't remember his name. There was this goalie that we played against a lot growing up. Never played on a team with him. This motherfucker would go full splits on like 75%. I'm like, you don't need to do it. You're just showing off that you can do the splits at this point.
Right.
Like,
is it functional
right.
at this point? I don't know.
It's like that was a glove save. You didn't need to go full splits for a glove save. Although,
I relate,
don't you though?
I relate to him though, because I didn't need every save to be a glove save, and I was trying to catch everything.
You did though. And I was commenting on it on the ice, and I thought Chloe slow-moing it was even better. But Megan, I'm sending her these pucks. She's catching them, turning towards the camera and dropping. I loved it so much. Your best Peter Mrazek impression.
Speaking of Peter Mrazek.
Oh my gosh.
Is also in the Pacific Division now, you guys. This is all so appropriate and relevant to our topic, which is why we're doing it.
Right, which is why we're talking about it. Why else would we? We're professionals. We don't just talk about random stuff. This is, I think, the most interesting. What does this say?
I think Jesse can do the full splits.
Yeah.
Actually, Alyssa's playing into it, right? She's like baiting you, like prove it, because she knows you want to.
Well, and we're supposed to be coming up with some type of. I tried to fix it from my seat. Some type of, hey, let's get to this number. Originally, we had said 7,000 Twitter followers before the start of the season.
Yeah.
And I'll try it on camera. Because we're still a little ways from there. So that's like
you're building up to it.
Well, right. And it's like, hey, if you guys want to see this, like there's got to be a little bit of like, work put into this campaign.
You'll start doing wall stretches right now if you know it's happening.
Right. Like the cartwheel one was like, if we could gain 20 more followers.
Yeah.
We need like several hundred here. So if you guys want to see an attempt at the full splits, get the word out. Make sure people are following Gorilla Sports on X.
If I were you, I would start preparing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? You're so right. We have the best. Best followers, best listeners.
Just dress for the job you want. Do the splits now.
Do the splits for the job that you want, not the job you have. Megan, I think this is the most interesting division to talk about. The Atlantic is kind of like, well, who's going to suck the least? The Metropolitan Division, I think there's a pretty clear split. These teams are going to be non-playoffs teams. This team is going to be, fighting for a spot. These teams are all in.
Yeah.
The Central is such a bloodbath.
It's so competitive still.
It's so competitive that there's so many good teams and the Blackhawks, right? This Pacific Division, and I would even say that this is probably the second year in a row that I feel like this. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't have like a strong feeling like, okay, well, this is going to be the team that wins the division. And I also think, I think this is a division that any one of the teams could end up in the playoffs or in that top three in this division, and it wouldn't surprise me. And at the same time, I think almost any of them could finish last, and it wouldn't be overly surprising. So, if you haven't been following along on these shows, I'm right here. I'm not at the main camera. I'm right here. If you haven't been following along with these shows, what we're doing here is we're going in reverse order based on the way they finished last year. We're going to talk about where they finished last year, any new additions, any notable moves from the summer. And then Megan has done a great job doing a little bit more of a deep dive into all these teams. And we're just going to kind of talk through where we see these guys falling. But we are going to start with the team, the worst team in the NHL last year, but also maybe among one of the most exciting, which is a funny thing to say right after the worst team in the NHL last year. But it's the San Jose Sharks. And the reason I say they're exciting is because you can just feel that they've got that something special is brewing here. I think Macklin Celebrini was a grand slam home run. The chemistry there with Will Smith. This is a team that, despite losing a lot of games last year, I thought kept the right mentality, kept the right attitude, and made it so that they were a threat on any given night, even though they really just did not have the roster in most instances to get things done. Obviously, the Avs were very comfortable dealing with the Sharks last year as they were able to pry Mackenzie Blackwood out of town, and that sent back Alexander Georgiev, who the San Jose Sharks have elected not to bring back, which tells you that they might try to take a little bit more serious of a run this year at climbing up in the standings. And for a team that still is young and inexperienced as the San Jose Sharks, with all due respect to our guy Georgie, you just couldn't have him back there in net under that type of duress every single night. They do add Philip Kurashev, John Klingberg on a good for John Klingberg contract. This is a team that was trying to get to the floor. William Eklund given 3 years. And then Dmitry Orlov, another one. Big money for a guy that probably got more in San Jose than he would have gotten elsewhere. And then Jeff Skinner, which is another one that I thought made a lot of sense for these guys. That's what they do in the free agency market. They also add Alex Nedeljkovic, Shane Bowers. They bring in Ryan Reeves, Noah Gregor. I think this is an interesting group, Megan. I think it's an interesting group that I'm not putting in a playoff conversation yet, but I am genuinely anxious to watch the San Jose Sharks this season.
You know, in my overview of the Pacific, there were teams that I was higher on at the start of last season who, by the end of this last year, I feel so differently doing these previews. And San Jose, though, is a team that I was probably more neutral on going into next year, excited to see what this young core was going to do, and then ultimately impressed with what they did. They had strong seasons, Celebrini and Smith in their first full NHL seasons, and William Eklund in his second full NHL season.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a promising young core still. I think they kind of punted on goaltending by the year's end. And so I'm wondering, is it finally time to trust Askarov with at least shared starts? And so 923 save percentage with the American League this last year. And going back to that Barracuda series, he was hard to beat, even though Barracuda ultimately don't prevail against the Colorado Eagles. He was pretty solid in net through their Calder Cup, playoff run there. And so I've really appreciated that San Jose has wanted to be careful and cautious in his development, especially looking back to what he was projected to be in Nashville, coming over to San Jose. They did not immediately rush him into the starter's net at the NHL level.
Which I think a lot of folks thought they would.
Yes.
And I think good on them for resisting that temptation.
I think so too. And so in looking, though, at his age and just his progression over the years, I think he's ready to share starts with Nedeljkovic. And so I think this is a good tandem to share starts with. Again, kind of like you said, I don't know that they're pushing for a playoff spot specifically, but I believe they've taken a step forward in a couple different ways this offseason. And I like the gradual approach that I think they can ramp up in the next couple of years, but they're building around this core by supplementing them with even more veteran support. And so I love the addition, what Toffoli added to Celebrini and Smith.
Totally.
Just a very adorable relationship, but also valuable veteran presence. I think they've just continued to pour into that in adding Jeff Skinner, who I think will also help with a little bit more scoring across the lineup, which San Jose was lacking. I even think Nick Leddy is a veteran addition who's still an 18 to 20 minute player who just dealt with a pretty bad injury last year that can help this forward group, adding a little bit of age and experience to round it out. I do think the back end is odd. I'm a little unsure how to read it because, one, Dmitry Orlov was very rough in the Carolina playoffs, despite typically being a really steady defender. So I don't think that this is a bad move for them to bolster their back end with this type of player. I think he'll be, especially through the regular season, a more stabilizing presence on that back end, because right now it's Mario Ferraro doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
UFA after this season too.
And they've got two young defenders in Jack Thompson and Mook Madulin. And so it's important to surround those young defensemen with the experienced players. So I think that's what Orlov will bring. And similarly, Klingberg, though I put such an asterisk by that, he was a third pair defenseman. After having missed some time, I was just impressed that he could still hang at NHL speed. I know this sounds so backhanded. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not sold on him being anything more than that at this stage in his career, just even in looking at how he was deployed last. And so I don't know what he can realistically do, but he will still bring about experience that is valuable to their young back end. Where I'm most encouraged, though, is up front, some of the veterans that they've added around. Celebrini coming off a 63-point season, 25 goals, first season in the NHL, mind you. Will Smith, 45 points, 18 goals, and Eklund with 58 points, which was a big jump from his introduction to the NHL the year before at 45 points. So they're on a track to just continue to get better. And I think with a little bit of experience around him, and I think Skinner has skill that can support a top six, it should be a step forward overall.
The money, I think, was one thing on John Klingberg and Dmitry Orlov in particular that jumped off the page to a lot of people. This is a team that is currently sitting at a $75 million cap hit, $19 million short of the salary cap, and just $5 million above the floor. So I'm with you on especially, Klingberg. That's a third pairing defenseman who will, give you a few minutes, here and there every night. Probably put a couple goals in the back of the net over the course of the season, but they were definitely a team that was able to give out some richer contracts to players purely because they needed to get to the floor, and they weren't going to be in any trouble of running up against that salary cap. I'm going to ask you an unfair question. Macklin Celebrini, Connor Bedard. Who would you take right now today?
Celebrini, but I am not as low on Bedard as other people are. I feel like a lot of people have put those two side by side and feel more confidence in Celebrini's trajectory. But I think the circumstance around Bedard feels a little different. And because he is such a young player, I think that he's susceptible to having some dips in his game related to low morale.
Yeah.
And so I want to see a big bounce back season from Bedard going into next year. And I think too, side by side, just looking at the differences between these teams, I see more support around Celebrini. I think too much pressure has been put on Bedard to be the guy who is the franchise player to take them into the next era of Chicago Blackhawks hockey. Yeah. And I don't think that's fair. I think San Jose is approaching this differently, even looking at how they've handled Askarov, right? With goaltending. I think they obviously want players like Celebrini and Smith to be future franchise players, but they're not being tasked with that responsibility and pressure right now. I think they have a good supporting cast of leaders and just great hockey people around them that I think has been lacking around Bedard. So anyways, that's my context. I really think Celebrini's game, though, is so well-rounded because both, and that's what it is for me, are such intense competitors, and I love that aspect about them, and that will take them far. Celebrini, I think where he separates is how he leverages that intense competitiveness in his game, and I think that he can be a really dominant two-way player later on in his career especially. But I think there is something not only highly skilled about his offensive ability and puck skill, but I think that he's going to be such a hard player to defend, hard to play against, just as he gets older.
I and again, keep in mind these are two 19-year-old kids that I'm about to say, but like to me, Connor Bedard is looking more and more like Patrick Kane, and Macklin Celebrini is looking more and more like Sidney Crosby. And I'm not saying that either of them are going to turn into those players, but like just in terms of what you're saying, it's hard to play against, more well-rounded. It's not that I'm down on Bedard. I'm just that high on Macklin Celebrini.
I really like him.
And so I'm with you right now. For me, it's Celebrini over Bedard. But also to your point, like I think, again, not that the San Jose Sharks have done anything to like push for wins, or anything like that. But, you add a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who's a winner, who's been there, who's done it. I like Barclay Goodrow. Again, a winner, been there, done that.
And they're utilizing him in a depth role, right? Like they're not asking Barclay Goodrow to be more than he is. And so I like Ty Dellandrea kind of similarly.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex Wenberg, once upon a time, I think what he adds to this forward group is still competitive enough, but the experience is ultimately why they're there. And
then you look at last year, the group that's around Bedard, Ryan Donato, who had a really good year.
I like Ryan Donato.
I do too. But again, still just like on a cup contender, that's a role player, and they were asking him to play a really big role on that Chicago Blackhawks team. Teuvo Teravainen, again, another player that's kind of settled in the middle, good player, kind of a young guy. Tyler Pertuzzi, I don't know if that's necessarily the player that you want molding your young superstar.
That's why you have a Ryan Reeves, out, as more of a 13th forward type player to still have that physicality and grit represented in the lineup.
And then you've got a guy like Nick Foligno, but who is and I think all the time about a guy like Milan Hajduk, who, when the Avs were really struggling, Milan Hajduk was the captain, and he said, "My game, I'm a third, fourth line guy now. I can't be the leader. It needs to be the next guy." And he's the one, My point is, like, you just go down this roster, and I think to the point that you're making, like, the Blackhawks just have not done a good job of giving Connor Bedard the support that he needs, that a young player. They've literally just dropped it all on his lap and said, "Go save us. It's all on you, buddy." And I think from year 1 to year 2, you saw that teams. I remember, and I think I remember making the comment to you in Bedard's first year. Every player was finishing their check all the way through on Bedard. I think you had guys that were teams that were keying in on him, and when there's so little substance around, it looks like it's a player that's really struggling. As for Macklin Celebrini, I think the Sharks have taken that very seriously, put players around him, put leadership around him that's helping him get acclimated. And even though they didn't have a great first year, everyone feels really great about him. And I think, to your point, that there's a large portion of that is circumstantial.
Yeah, because some of it, too, is like I feel there was lacking forward depth for the Sharks last year, even though I think they had the right idea and they've just continued to build upon it going into this offseason. The other big difference is having a friend, like a player who is a highly touted prospect in a similar position in Will Smith, but then also Will Eklund also being there as another young player coming up through the pipeline, that there are other people you could point to that are in a similar situation. And that is where some of that shared responsibility takes the pressure off versus Bedard being such a marquee piece. It's been tougher.
And through all that, Megan, Cal Ritchie's looking like Patrice Bergeron. Great call out by Alyssa in the chat. But no, I am going to be anxious to talk about the Blackhawks next week, because I do also think that a lot of this, Bedard, who is 20 now, by the way. I said he was 19 a minute ago. He's now 20. The Bedard celebrating stuff. I do think that the Hawks have fumbled a little bit here since winning the Bedard sweepstakes. I think they've stepped on a couple rakes and have struggled to get out of their own way a bit in trying to get this jump started.
You can tell that San Jose is following a plan, and it's a gradual one. So even though they can't get to their destination in one season, they're building towards it. Whereas Chicago strikes me as a team that has had maybe semblance of a plan, but has lost faith in it early, just like with the coaching change. I liked Luke Richardson. And so I think it'll be very important for any team rebuilding to have a plan and commit to it, because Jared Bednar's, inaugural season here, we talk about it all the time, but he had a plan and he knew it wasn't going to be built in a single season, in a day, and he committed to it and drove that identity into the team over several seasons, some grim seasons early on, and it ultimately paid off. And I think that's the importance of the patient route with a rebuild that Chicago, I'm not sure, has grasped.
And you just look at some of the players they've added in the last couple of years, and you can tell that it was let's get competitive. Let's push for the play. We got Bedard. Let's get competitive.
Right.
And it's like, slow down.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right. So all that is to say, good for you, San Jose. Keep doing what you're doing. It's probably not going to be this year, but I like a lot of what they're doing. And when you got a guy like Celebrini leading the charge there, you're going to put yourself in a good spot.
And sometimes they make great trades with the Avs. So I'm cool with the San Jose Sharks.
And hey, we didn't even mention
Oscar
the
Olausen.
real ultimate threat for the San Jose Sharks this year.
Maybe he has a real chance then at rounding out, the bottom of the forward group.
And
And
I'm also going to attempt flying home today as opposed to driving my car. Maybe that'll work out.
Wow. Maybe they wanted maybe they wanted a Swedish friend for William Eklund.
Yeah. Maybe he just hates Gabe Landeskog.
Well, they didn't really get to play together.
That's so true.
They traded Zetterlund, who I felt a little weird about that decision by San Jose. But maybe, they're Mackenzie Blackman.
Nope. You know what? That's probably a story I should keep to myself.
Well, anyways, it's important for Swedes to have friends. That's the moral of this story.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we'll move on. Maybe the NHL's most team in the league now, and a team that, Megan, looks like they're gearing up to be the 2010s Minnesota Wild. Just perfectly average, stuck right in the middle. Seattle Kraken. That face you just made is how I think everyone feels about the Seattle Kraken.
Who's driving this thing?
I honestly don't know.
Kind of feels like if you made AI a GM, because there's some of these moves that are slightly defensible.
Oh my God, that is such the perfect assessment of this team. Even going back to their expansion draft. If you told me that AI did their expansion draft, I'd believe you. That is bravo.
I'm committing to it more too, because AI can compile data, statistics, but it's not going to be as good at interpreting things like advanced analytics. And then, of course, the very important thing of the eye test and culture too.
Right.
And culturally, what is the fit? And stylistically, what is the fit? Because there's only so much information you can gather about a player from the numbers alone, right? There's still a style of hockey that they play, a model of player that they fit. Anyways, all that to say, I'm not sure I totally understand the Seattle Kraken. Even though I've wanted to poach so many of their players this offseason for my trade board, they lack that elite goal scoring talent at the top. Like they have Jared McCann as their only 60-point player this last season. Chandler Stevenson, a player that they paid a hefty price tag once upon a time to bring on board, 51 points and then 26 goals from Jaden Schwartz as their goal leader. A player, again, that I really like. But outside of that, I think that, you see Beniers gradually ramping up and Shane Wright finally getting the opportunity to gradually ramp up. And so what I want to point out too is I don't think this is an issue that falls squarely on any one player's shoulders, right? Like I'm not looking at Beniers or Wright and saying you're not carrying your weight. I feel like collectively, because of how they're built, they all just have to be more. And maybe that's an issue of the construction rather than the players themselves, right? It's like maybe you just need more of a game-breaking player at the top, so that you're not relying on contributions across the lineup so much, because maybe that is too tough a burden. Like the scoring's pretty distributed throughout their top 9, but you just don't have that game-breaking, game-changing player. And I think that's ultimately what's lacking on the forward side. And their back end is intriguing in that this was a team that was top 10 in scoring chances allowed and high danger chances allowed. Vince Dunn missed a lot of time. And so analytically, when he wasn't the lineup, he played well, showed well, and I think that Adam Larsson is still a very good defender. But players like Montour, another player that I think they, paid a pretty price for once upon a time, not bad, but just maybe not carrying his weight, especially given the contract value versus the year that he had defensively. And kind of the same with Alexiak, whose style of hockey, it's big, it's rough, and it serves a purpose, but you still need to be very reliable defensively. And I think, usually when I see these types of numbers with a decor,
this is an expensive back end.
It's expensive, and so it's not living up to the expense.
Right.
Because it's not bad. I want to make it clear I'm not saying Seattle's back end is bad. And that's why I think they go out and they pay another pretty price for Lindgren, because they're like, well, let's get a little more reliable and have some insurance behind Montour and Alexiak for, maybe we need to alleviate some minutes there. Like the way that Alexiak plays, I imagine, is taking a toll on his body this stage in his career. Maybe they need to manage his minutes. Don't know what that is about. But overall, the defense wasn't good enough, because usually when you see these types of numbers, you have a goaltending issue.
Right.
But Joey Decord had a great season though. Like he was fine, especially all things considered. Defensively, for Decord to have those numbers was actually pointing to a good season in net for him. So where I'm going with this is, it's an expensive back end. I think it is made up of some pretty good defenders that maybe just didn't all totally live up to their price tag this last year.
6 defenders under contract, $29.7 million tied up in Vince Dunn, Brandon Montour, Adam Larson, Jamie Alexiak, Ryan Lindgren, and Josh Mahura. Josh Mahura making less than $1 million. So some bigger value contracts, all with either no trade or modified no trade clauses on that back end. Every defenseman. So
you can see where AIGM said, okay, defense wasn't good. Well, let's go get Ryan Lindgren.
More defense.
Pay him whatever he wants.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, don't get me wrong. I think defensively they'll be better with Ryan Lindgren in versus not.
Sure.
But the money spent is where this does feel like we've got AI behind the wheel.
And again, like let's just take this AI thing back a step further. Like the year that they knocked the Avs out of the playoffs, they had 2 second lines and 2 third lines. And like, if you plug that into NHL 26 or whatever, the system would probably say, yeah, you got 4 really good lines here. Like, it's just, it's like, yeah, it was fine. It was deep and it was fine.
I'm so glad you said that, because my note for Seattle is Seattle continues to build around depth because it worked that one time in 2022.
Yes.
And here's why. Mason Marchment.
So that's where I was going with this. When you said I could see how AIGM, like, oh, okay. AIGM said, we need depth. We need mean. We need Marchment.
We need Marchment.
Print.
Because it's like you had Brandon Tanev right there, and he can skate more effectively than Marchment. Because here's the issue too.
He doesn't wear eyeliner like Vakaitis from Semi-Pro.
Stop. Don't even make me think about his eyes. They're terrifying. But when I look at the forward group, I'm like, okay, who's going to play Shane Wright? I still think he has the ability to be a player in this league. I like Shane Wright. Mason Marchment can't skate. Shane Wright is a very fast player. How is Mason Marchment going to keep up with this forward group is what I don't understand. Like, he adds this annoying and persistent factor that can be sometimes effective. And honestly, drawing upon that 2022 parallel more, I remember how much Yanni Gourde got under people's skin in that series and how it was kind of an effective way of baiting the Avs out of playing their style of hockey at times. But adding Mason Marchment doesn't, just, all right, we saw annoying kind of worked and they need depth. Let's add Mason Marchment. It's still not fully justifiable to me, especially when they weren't interested in re-signing Brandon Tanev, who was right there at one point.
But again, AIGM, I can totally see why adding a player like that. Again, like, even again, you go back to the expansion draft, like all the stuff they do is defensible. It's all like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, he's a decent player. But I think the example you just gave is a great example of like, okay, well, peel that layer back, even just one layer, and you start to see question marks immediately in these types of decisions. And I think the Tanev to Marchment thing is a great, parallel. What, you mean that?
Why would you do this to me? That's actually not the scariest picture too, because the contrast of how blue those eyes are is more muted in this photo. It's the iciness of the blue that is most scary.
Combined with I'm being funny by saying he has like really thick eyelashes or something.
Google Miley Cyrus eyes, stare, something like that. There is this very iconic photo of Miley with a very It's a stare that penetrates your soul. It's terrifying. And
All right, I typed in the word Miley and Cyrus Blue Eyes was the first thing that came up.
You know what you're doing. This isn't your first Google.
Ah! Okay. Yeah.
Did it just do that by itself?
I'm assuming this is the photo you're talking
Did
about.
AIGM hack your computer?
Yeah, the Seattle GM's
This is what the Seattle Kraken don't want you to know.
Yeah, give me the tight shot here, so I don't have to put this all the way up on the screen.
Doesn't that look like Mason Marchment?
Does that look like Mason Marchment to anybody? Chloe's
said
yes.
Screaming, we.
Great callback. Great callback to Chloe abandoning us. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll be curious to see what this AI model has up their sleeves for this year, but I expect them to finish almost exactly where they did.
This is not to be like overly funny too, but it's also kind of like, oh, team didn't do great. New coach.
New coach.
That's definitely the problem, you guys. That's
Seriously.
what other NHL teams do, at least when we were scouring the internet.
And to me, this will be the last thing that we can move on because we're already moving really slow through all this.
Yikes.
You got $10 million tied up in Philip Grubauer and Joey Decord. Philip Grubauer spent time in the American Hockey League last year. You're just overspending on middling players.
Yeah, I don't think they're even comfortable with Grubauer as the backup going into next year. I think his job's on the line, but obviously that is going to be tough to move
maybe
out.
Edmonton will trade for him. Let's move on here to a team that might end up being my dark horse pick this season, Megan. I don't know why. I've got the vibe from them right now. And it also depends on what they do with our boy McT. The Anaheim Ducks.
No, I can't do this again.
Really?
I'm always so high on the Ducks.
Oh, see, there's a team in the Central that is going to be I'm ready to be hurt again.
Is it Utah?
It is.
I'm ready to be hurt again.
I've picked them like 9 fucking years in a row to finally make the playoffs, and every year they make me look so dumb.
No, they got this in the bag, but I can't do this with Anaheim.
I like them. I like the energy. I think moving on from John Gibson was a good move. You're turning it over to Dostal. Now, again, like I said, they have to get McTavish back in the fold for me to be actually on board with these guys. But I like the Ducks. How about this? To be a dark horse to make some noise. I don't know if they actually get in, but I think they'll be there at the end of the year, closer than they have been for the last several offseason for these guys. They get Lucas Dostal extended, Drew Hellison extended. They give a bananas contract to Mikael Granlund, but again, you look at cap situation where they were needing to spend money, they were having to get on the books. I get it. I think that's a quality player that is absolutely being overpaid, but in their situation, you can live with it. Nestorenko gets extended. Frank Vetrano extended. You got Ville Husso there. But then trade-wise, Oliver Schilling. No, I'm just kidding. They do bring in Chris Kreider, which, again, is a player definitely in the back nine, but I think it's going to be some valuable experience, and he's definitely going to add at least a couple goals for this group, and then a couple big ones. Wow, how about this? 3 trades from the Ducks this summer. Bringing in Chris Kreider, moving out Trevor Zegras, and moving out John Gibson. Only one of those not listed by TSN as a major trade. And it's the Trevor Zegras deal. I just find that a little bit interesting. They ship Trevor Zegras out. Ryan Poehling comes back along with a 2nd and a 4th round pick. And then they finally they move on from John Gibson, finally pulling the trigger on this, Megan, as the reins really have been handed to Dostal. They bring Peter Mrazek, a 4th and a 2nd back the other way. I made the joke about the vibes. A lot of what I like about this team is just like, it feels like they got some good momentum going for the first time in a while.
I feel like if you ran the San Jose Sharks through a simulator of what their rebuild plan could entail, this is one of the possible outcomes, and it's manifested in the Anaheim Ducks because they've been careful with Dostal and not pushing him into the starter's net too soon. And they were careful with Leo Carlson's minutes in his first. really love Leo Carlsson. They were careful with his minutes in his first NHL season so that they didn't just throw him in and expect him to be a solution right away, and that has yielded good results. Leo Carlsson took a step forward 1 year to the next in terms of his production. 20 goals this last year, 20 goals from Gauthier. Kind of a player I think people wrote off after the trade because attitudinally they're like, well, what's this guy's deal, right? 20 goals season.
What's this guy's deal?
In his first full NHL season. I think attitudinally they're like, oh, he's got a bad attitude. He didn't want to play for Philly. But he's had a great first year into the league with 20 goals from him as well, 22 goals from McTavish, a new career high, and he just continues to push his goal total season by season. So we've talked a little bit about his utilization over the last couple of years and why it was so critical to, I would say, maybe give him that responsibility sooner than he saw it. I think that was maybe an issue in his trajectory, and starting to see some of these numbers really start to push forward for him as a player. I think keeping him in a depth role maybe hampered some of his opportunities and challenges with matchups in a way that I think he won't have to worry about moving forward. There's obviously a coaching change at play here too to oversee this group. So hopefully if McTavish is a part of this forward group moving forward, we continue to see him utilized in middle six, top six role is where I'd really like to see him, and giving him, good reps on the power play. Where I'm going with this, because I know I teed this up like this was a bad thing. I'm just not sure I'm entirely convinced of the zest though. And I'll be curious to see if there's a difference in moving on from Trevor Zegras, because I see him as a piece of this core that was once a really important part of the future. Moving on is a huge decision. And so that does then put a little bit more emphasis on players like Leo Carlsson and McTavish. And so with McTavish still not re-signed, I'm nervous then about what this group would look like without him, because Gauthier, Leo Carlsson, kind of the youth, at least heading up the forward group. Don't get me started on the back end. It's a bunch of children. And then there's Jacob Trouba and Radko Gudas, which is good. You need to have at least those two adults. But it is so many young T, which you won't hear me complaining about.
Nobody
but it might
else
be
over the age of 24.
Too young is where I'm going with this. We see Drew Helleson kind of finally graduate to the full-time NHL role. Excited for what that could look like too, because his style of player was one you didn't need to rush into the league anyways, right? Like he's baby Josh Manson. That could be a part of that back end that's not totally represented, but could be trained by a player like Gudas, who plays a very heavy physical style. And Trouba, maybe not his biggest fan of the way he toes that line, but a really good mentor for a player like Helleson. And then Zellweger, a player who has been not so differently limited in his opportunity coming out the gate. I think it's just a lot of ifs, whereas I've seen some of the ifs realized in some of San Jose's young core, whereas this young core, I think having Zegras at the forefront is sort of where I put my attention to, and seeing the success of players like Troy Terry at the top of that lineup. It's just become a lot more emphasized on where the youth is, and a bit untested is where I'm at with Anaheim. I do think the addition of Chris Kreider, though, helps to level set some of that in the experience that he brings. But I'm nervous about the Ducks. Also, I love Lukáš Dostal. So I think finally giving him the starter's net is a great step, but you want to make sure the team in front of him is ready to support him. And that's where looking at that super young decor worries me a little bit, is you don't want to mess with a still very young goaltender's confidence, especially now giving him the full-time starter
he's
role.
The number one. Yep.
You've got a Czech duo too for the goalie tandem now. So just another friend, in addition to Radko Gudas, another Czech on the team. But all that to say, I'm just not convinced. I think this next year will answer a lot of what I'm unconvinced on, in seeing how more responsibility for players like Leo Carlsson, how they handle that, how they handle themselves. Because I'm ultimately wondering, what does the leadership look like on this group?
And so that's where I wanted to go to, was who are the leaders? Because there's so many young players here. Who is that's driving this bus for the young guys? And that's actually what I like about these guys, Megan. Mikael Granlund, he's gone on deep playoff runs. Chris Kreider's been to Stanley Cup finals. Alex Killorn, a player we haven't mentioned yet that I really like with this group. You got a guy like Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano. Like you said, Trouba and Gudas definitely walk a line. But nice leadership that back end. And then look, without reopening the full conversation around Joel Quenneville, because there is a full conversation to be had there. I'm curious to see. You had Greg Cronin, who is, an inexperienced NHL head coach, I think is maybe the right way to say that. Doesn't have a lot of reps, trying to, hey, I can communicate with these young guys. You're bringing in Joel Quenneville, who, clearly has a track record of being able to draw success out of players. I'm curious to see how he helps lead the young players.
I am too, because I do think today's NHL coach being able to connect with young players requires some evolution.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's why we're seeing a trend of younger coaches or players coaches. And with such a young group, it is critically important then to have a coach that's connected to that and understands that. Because I think we've seen, just like with Torts in Philly, the culture class or, difference of generations clash with the old guard and the new. That can sometimes happen with these young players that I'm just a big question mark over the Anaheim Ducks for me.
Yep.
And I want to believe in them so bad. They have Troy Terry. That's all you need to tell me.
All right, let's move on to another, team that I think the real solution, the real conversation is play better. The Vancouver Canucks. This is a team that it was mired with off-ice instability and controversies and drama all last season. I think at one point their top 3 highest paid players, with the exception of Quinn Hughes, were all, they found their names in the rumor mill. What's going to happen with these guys? Brock Besser gets all the way to free agency, sits out there all day, and then ultimately just re-signs. A run it back type offseason, with the exception of adding Evander Kane, which we all know the gamble that is.
And just given my concern around Vancouver, I am not confident that is a very big difference maker. I could see it having regular season results for them, but ultimately come any sort of playoff time, he lacks discipline. He's easy to unravel, and the impact that he should have then, because he can be kind of a heavy power forward that gets under a guy's skin. But in the playoffs, when the margins for error are so thin, he gets baited into some undisciplined behavior, and it costs his team, and he's not having then the offensive impact that he's supposed to be having, that he can have in the regular season, as we've seen. So I'm not really sold on that moving the needle either way for me.
It was a really only significant add of the summer. Otherwise, there was a lot of stuff going out.
And that's where I'm concerned for the Vancouver Canucks next year. Now, I think that both Quinn Hughes and Thatcher Demko deal with injury that affects kind of the overall look of this team last year. So I'd be curious, full season of Hughes, full season of Demko. One, is it possible?
Right.
Because I think that Lankinen held it down. He played 51 games, 902 save percentage. So I think I can understand a little bit how they part ways with Shilovs in saying, okay, but we do have Kevin Lankinen, and he can handle a pretty good amount of starts and at least be a stable choice in our net. And we're really taking a gamble then on Thatcher Demko's health. Nervous around that, hoping the best for him. Can Kiefer Sherwood repeat a 19-goal, 21 assists, 40-point season? He had 27 points in Nashville the year before, and then nothing else that remotely looked like that prior.
Yeah.
So to me, a little nervous around that being sustainable for Sherwood. Not so different from how we're talking about Kivi Ranta.
So I was going to say that I didn't want to be the one to bring Kivi Ranta back into it, but I completely agree.
But the difference between that is the Avs don't need Kivi Ranta to be Kiefer Sherwood
Such a good point.
To the Canucks last year. You look at then with some of the drama around personnel, you're right, the Pettersson drama, the JT Miller drama. I think it impacted Pettersson's year. He also didn't play the full season, so he only had 64 games. So his points totals are down too. So another player I'm looking at, right, what does Vancouver look like with a full year of health, a new head coach, And it's a lot of ifs because, Besser comes off a pretty good season, and even better one the year before. So he's just signed this new contract. And I find one of two things happen when players sign big contracts like that. They either go out and demonstrate why they just got that contract, or they rest back a little bit. So it's so important for one, Kiefer Sherwood, to repeat his success, because I think the scoring throughout the lineup, especially with like having Pettersson out at times, Quinn Hughes from the back end out at times, they just didn't get enough offense where they needed it. So you're really counting then on Sherwood firing and Brock Besser just continuing in this trajectory of having strong seasons. I'm also excited to see, though, without the drama of some of the storyline of the season, is it a little bit more stabilized for them? But overall, I am not sure this is a team that can push it. I could see him in a wild card spot. That's not hard to sell me on. There's still a lot of talent in this lineup. Health is a big issue. And with so many players dealing with things last year, I don't really know what they look like, is maybe the better way of putting it.
I'm with you. There again, another team that, like, if they ended up with an identical record to last year, wouldn't be overly surprised. Calgary Flames. This has been a team that, you have to, since the Matthew Tkachuk trade, they've had to watch him win 2 Stanley Cups, and they've just kind of been a mess. Now you're into the territory of, do you move Nazem Kadri? Are you going back into the rebuild mode? Are you trying to retool? You add Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee, part of the way through the season. But otherwise, like, $15 million in space. Huberdeau, Kadri, Sharangovich, Joel Farabee, Blake Coleman, Mikael Backlund, Ryan Lomberg, Mackenzie Weegar, Kevin Ball, Rasmus Anderson, Dustin Wolf. A lot of guys. A lot of just, guys. Thoughts on the Calgary Flames?
Well, they've had a really quiet summer, so it's hard for me to imagine where they take the step forward with not having changed much. And the big issue being the star players aren't enough. You don't have a single 70-point player on this roster. I think you've heard me make mention of that in evaluating some of these other teams. You need a game-changing player on every team, at least one. And I think I've even talked about it being more in the 80-point range if you're talking about a top-line player in this league. So even the 70-point threshold feels really hard for me to justify it not having been met. And you look, there's maybe some production spread throughout the lineup, but it's not enough if you don't have that difference-making player. And that's ultimately what it boils down to with Calgary, because I think that Dustin Wolf is a young goaltender who 53 games played. They're finally trusting him with some more starts. He's ready to take that next step. And they bring in Prosvetov, which I really like because they can balance the workload of Wolf. Prosvetov can still get opportunity because Vladar was sub 900 last year, backing up Wolf, which with only 53 games played, that was still a pretty shared workload between the goalies. So they're a little more trusted in net, in my opinion. But the issue of the lack of production from the players that they pay to be their offense is ultimately a big concern for me that doesn't have me looking much at this group. Like the back end, I've always liked Mackenzie Weegar.
Yeah, absolutely.
It leaves me wanting. It doesn't feel complete. I think Morgan Frost can take a big step forward. That's a player that I believe they re-sign in this offseason. Obviously, part of the trade with Philadelphia once upon a time. Joel Farabee, also now part of this group, improves the depth a little bit. So I think, I'll be curious to see the year that Morgan Frost has on the heels of the extension. But overall, I don't know. Nothing is jumping off the pages at me at this being a team that takes a big step forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. And especially if they, obviously start to make the decision to sell off some of these guys, at the top. Just not a lot there to inspire confidence. There's a step forward.
I have a proposal because of our timing. We could save Vegas and Edmonton for their own conversation because I feel like those could be longer. I don't actually know. Or because there's still LA
I've got
too.
some hot Edmonton takes that we should get to real quick. Let's
Oh.
go. Yeah.
Okay, because I want to give us the right amount of time is maybe the better. What do you think? I mean, maybe we save LA and Vegas then and go to Edmonton next.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that. Because Edmonton I just find so fascinating. This is a team that is obviously back-to-back years going to the Stanley Cup final. Game 7 2 seasons ago, they looked less competitive this second year. And that, you could argue and have a pretty strong argument that, yeah, Florida was just that good. You and I, right after the first round, were saying, gosh, maybe you wouldn't have wanted the Avs to make it all the way there because I don't know if they could have beaten that Florida team. But, Megan, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. There's some good players here. I like Mangiapane. Trent Frederick's a good player. Adam Henrique, older player. Who, is looking to win a Stanley Cup. I think a nice depth piece for them. But for me, it continues to be the same two issues for the Edmonton Oilers. One, I think you've got a top pairing that has 2 number 2 defensemen on it, which is fine. That's a lot of teams are built that way. I just cannot believe that you either still have Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard or that Stan Bowman still has a job. I just don't know how you could look at a team that has now gone to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row and has lost because you cannot buy a save. How you go through another summer not addressing this issue. And watching a guy like John Gibson, whether he would have actually been the fix or not, just how many goalies are they going to lose out on, and how many times do they have to go to the Stanley Cup final and lose before somebody there says, hey, maybe we should get someone that could stop a shot. Don't even need all of them, just a shot would be helpful.
Well, and I think they need to decide how to utilize their goalie tandem. I'll say it that way too, because they trust Stu Skinner until they don't. And then you've got a goalie going in cold into series, into games, and that messes with rhythm. It's a very real thing with goaltenders.
And then they trust that goalie till they don't.
And so it's not even just an issue of, they needed to move on from one goaltender. I think they probably needed to move on from both, or at least commit to what the utilization is going to be. Right? Do you have a true starter?
Right.
Is it a 1A, 1B? Then you have to actually deploy your goaltenders like 1A, 1B.
Right.
But keep in mind that creates a challenge in a 7-game playoff series by series, when you've had your goalie sharing the workload in the regular season. So if you want to be a real contender, you have to be considerate of that than if you are entertaining a goalie tandem like 1A, 1B. And so I have the same issue with Edmonton. I mean, we've talked about too, it's all so self-inflicted. Like, we like Trent Frederick. We don't like this contract. The money, the value doesn't really make sense for the role that he plays on this team. And they handcuff themselves then to yet another big contract. Like, they know they didn't get it right with Darnell Nurse in the contract. Not that he isn't a valuable part of their D-car. They just know that's not the right value for that player. And they go and they sign themselves up for yet another mismatch with Trent Frederick that I can't continue. I don't know. I've never been a huge Edmonton defender, but I just can't keep coming to your defense, guys.
Right.
You now limit your ability to resolve goaltending even more, because if you were bringing in a bona fide starter, that's going to come in at starter money, and you're going to need to make sure that you can allocate space for that, because otherwise, like, the forward depth, you lose Zach Hyman, obviously, ahead of the Stanley Cup final, and I think that has an impact in the series, but there was still overall an issue of maybe stars shrinking a little bit in that series, in part looking at the way Edmonton started games too. It just pointed to a team that I think maturity-wise has been building more mental toughness, because I do imagine that's left a lot of scar tissue for this team, but it still hasn't been enough to translate to results in the Stanley Cup final when they've needed it, because it's still an impressive feat too that they've gotten their back-to-back.
Totally.
But this is where it's self-inflicted, right? Then they're not taking that next step to pinpoint where they can get better and giving themselves that slight advantage. Though I would say goaltending is not slight. That's obviously a big thing. But they have two issues between the back end and the goaltending that you can't afford to have both either. So there's a part of me that could entertain, with the right partner, Ekholm or Bouchard could be considered a top pair defenseman in the same way that like Taves by himself maybe would not have been a top pair defenseman, but the right complement of Makar Taves just made so much sense.
Absolutely.
I really like Matthias Ekholm. I think he's a really steady defender, but you know, he's kind of limited in what he is. And Evan Bouchard, so offensively gifted, puck skill off the charts, just great vision from the blue line and a really heavy shot, but not responsible enough defensively. Some of that I hope and pray comes with time for this player, but that being the solution then for the top pair, it just isn't a great fit right now in this moment in time with who these players are today. And so that's where I think you look at the rest of this, like no real issue with Kulak and Nurse. It's just when you don't have a true top pair, again, together, then I think it hurts the bottom line. And then, you know, things start to kind of fall off by that third pair in a way that's not trusted. And I think that you saw why in the Stanley Cup final.
Knowing that we were going to talk about this today, I was thinking about it. And honestly, the Devon Taves thing was what came to my mind. I said, like, I think he's absolutely a top pairing defenseman, but I think he's a number two. And you need for him to really shine the way that he does here, he needs to play with a true number one like Cale Makar is. And I think for the Edmonton Oilers, you've got two number twos there. And it's just going to be hard for them to win late in the playoffs in those types of matchups when you don't have that true number one. And then the underscore on, you mentioned Trent Frederick and the overpay there for a team that's already so cap strapped. And I know Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl can do amazing things. I know. And I know that you could even make the argument there were stretches in this last year's playoffs where if it wasn't for McDavid and Draisaitl producing the way they were,
1,000%.
do they keep going? But the Stanley Cup final, again, underscored why you have to have more than that. Florida did an outstanding job of boxing those two dudes up.
Absolutely. I mean, even with the Dallas series and what was done to Makar and McKinnon.
Right. And this just underscores like, okay, and by you giving basically $4 million to Trent Frederick, it's going to limit your ability to do that down the lineup. And so if you get into another situation
where you lose a Zach Hyman,
right, where you lose a Zach Hyman or you're down a guy or whatever, and McDavid and Draisaitl can't just put the puck in the back of the net whenever they want, what are you doing? Who are you going to? Where's the help?
It's a bit of a tough sell. Like I do like Adam Henrique as kind of a guy behind there in the depth chart. And I like the addition of Mangiapane. I think his style of play too is really a steady two-way player. So, don't hate the representation there, but I think because of how heavily they rely on McDavid and Draisaitl, and I'll say Hyman in that too, like to lose one of those three, it's obvious there's not enough supporting cast that can do enough offensively to make up for that.
Looming over all of this is the pending unrestricted free agency of Connor McDavid. Now, I did see a report a couple weeks ago that said talks have been positive, that they felt they've made a little bit of progress, but I do also think that there is a portion of this that Connor McDavid is really going to need to be sold on what the plan is and how they get over the hump. And I can't imagine it. Look, I know they're buddies with Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. I know that they're publicly would never say anything. But if you're Connor McDavid, Megan, are you signing an 8-year deal? If you don't know for sure what's happening in net, I'm not. If winning is really the number one thing that's important to him, I imagine there's got to be some real progress made on here's what we're doing to win. And I don't know if I see that this offseason. I just see more of the same.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they would like to have made more attempts, but they are kind of anchored to past mistakes, like with Darnell Nurse, and they're still so committed in Skinner. Though, I think they were exploring the goalie market. It just, there isn't a move I can point to that I will say that's where they've taken the step forward. Like I'll really see tangible results because of this.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. We do have Going Deep with Nate Jackson and Eric Goodman coming up next here in just about 15 minutes. So we're going to jump out. We'll be right back at it tomorrow. We'll finish this conversation. Then we got a fun show planned for you guys tomorrow to go along with it as well. I'm Jesse Montano. She is Meghan Angley. We got Chloe back behind the glass today. Like I said, make sure you guys stay locked into that Gorilla Sports YouTube. Hit like on this video. Make sure you guys subscribe. We are climbing our way to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So help us out there. And then stick around for Going Deep with Nate Jackson, Eric Goodman coming up next. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.